Welcome. Thank you for coming to my talk, The Augmented Engineer, Using AI Tools to Improve Development Efficiency. My name is Will Marple. I'm a principal engineer at Black Airplane. We are an agency that specializes in full stack web and mobile application development. So what we're going to discuss today, the current state of AI landscape as it relates to our industry, in my opinion, really. AI tools I'm using in my dev workflow, as well as some tools that are kind of on my radar that I haven't really tried yet, but I think are very interesting and intend to engage with in very short order. A little bit on understanding the limitations of working with AI collaboratively today in your workflow, and a little bit on developing a healthy relationship with it. And then just a little bit on kind of my thoughts on how AI might impact our careers over the next 5 to 10 years, and what I'm doing to embrace AI technology and kind of move along with it. So I think it's an irrefutable point at this point that AI is transforming the way that we develop software applications today. AI-powered tools are becoming increasingly popular and prevalent among many developers in our industry, and AI is affecting areas well beyond the scope of development even. We're seeing it being used in areas like productivity, wellness, etc. So I believe that we're really on the cusp, and this is controversial, of course, but my opinion, I believe that we're right on the cusp of a revolutionary shift. I think, we've seen some hype in the stock market. We've seen a lot of startups, popping up, AI this, AI that, and it can tend to feel like this is a lot of AI hype going on. But, behind the scenes, I think there are a lot of companies that are building some impressive things. And I think that we are kind of on the cusp of a revolution, not just in the digital realm, but in realms like AI robotics that are really going to shift the landscape of our reality. So kind of plays in a little bit to my why. I think for a lot of us, we're probably all past the AI is going to replace me and my job because it's going to come write all my code, right? None of us in this room are probably afraid of that. However, I do think that there is, at least the way I'm approaching it, a need to be proactive, a need to be aware of what is out there in the AI landscape in terms of tooling that could benefit me, that could benefit my clients, both what's available to me now, both what is up and coming, and I do that through online community. I do that through community in my workplace, learning what my colleagues are using. I mean, there are a few elements even in this slideshow as I was preparing it for this talk that were influenced by colleagues at work that they're like, hey, have you seen this thing yet? There's a thing that just dropped a few days ago. So it's a rapidly changing space. And I think that the thing I want to encourage you guys in today is, as technologists, like if you've been in technology for any period of time, you're a technical problem solver, and you are uniquely positioned, I think, to deeply understand the landscape. You don't have to be, I don't come from a data science or a AI or machine learning background, but AI doesn't scare me, and I engage with AI tools. I use AI tools in my development workflow, and I think as the AI industry progresses, we're going to continue to be able to leverage those things, if we're intentional, leverage those things to be more and more efficient at what we build. So this is not going to be a talk about prompt engineering with ChatGPT, but I don't think the talk would be complete without at least addressing it, because it's something that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, right? And so I think the main thing that I wanted to present in this talk is just a cognizance of what you're sharing with ChatGPT's web interface. Right, so there are a couple of different ways that we could engage with AI technologies, and when we are slapping code into the web interface of ChatGPT, we are remotely sharing potentially proprietary private code that lives in a repo that belongs to us or our clients, our workplace, right? And so data and privacy, confidentiality, understanding limitations, and biases. So ChatGPT is trained on a very large data set, but it still has biases. It still can generate incorrect and misleading information. So we still need to be architects, we still need to be experts, we still need to be reviewing, like we're code reviewing what this thing is generating. It's great for collaboration, it's great for first passes. So if you're architecting a new heavy feature and maybe you're considering a couple of different approaches for that specific thing, maybe it's authentication or what data layer technology you're going to use or whatever. It's a great collaborative tool for that sort of thing. It's great, I find, for mental blocks as well. And that's one of the points I wanted to kind of bring up because I see a couple of extremes if we were to kind of try to define a spectrum, and both extremes are kind of rare, but you see a lot in between the two ditches. And the one ditch is, a developer using ChatGPT is just kind of the new dev that Stack Overflows everything, right? Like you're a noob dev if you go out and you ask ChatGPT a question. And I think that's one ditch, right? And then the other ditch is, wow, ChatGPT, like, hey, write me this thing. I slap it in my code base. It runs, it ships. Like that's the other extreme, right? And so I think what I use it for quite often is, maybe I'm having a rough day. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep. Maybe there's a lot of distractions, struggling with brain fog. There are any number of reasons why we might be sitting at the keyboard with some business requirements sitting next to us and going, oh gosh, I know I need to do this thing, but where's that first line of code going to come from? ChatGPT is great for that, right? And it's going to give you wrong answers sometimes, but what I've found personally is it's a great evolution of the rubber duck, right? So even though it's wrong, I'm going to go, yeah, that thing's right, that thing's partially right, those two things are wrong, but now I know exactly what I want to do, right? And I go and I just start implementing it. So I've found that ChatGPT is great for, as long as you're thinking critically and deeply evaluating what it's generating, it's great for that purpose. So what can we do about proprietary code use in something like ChatGPT? Like I would avoid it, and in a lot of cases, I think we're going to see a growing number of workplaces like improve and implement policies around prevention of placing proprietary code in interfaces like ChatGPT. But for today, where it still can be a little bit of the Wild West sometimes, code anonymization could be a good practice, and this is going to, of course, be up to our judgment here. Simplification, but we're looking for, a comprehensive stripping away of anything that would reveal any sort of protected intellectual property belonging to us or our clients. Good to know and be proactive and intentional about understanding policies around this where you work. Also, understanding how services like OpenAI, ChatGPT, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Claude, Bard, a lot of these services, do you know how they're handling your data? So important to kind of be intentional with that. So second approach, so not a great idea to just slap proprietary code in a web interface online. What are some other approaches? So there are a number of different technologies that are either available today or are in development that take a localized approach to privacy with your code. So the model would be loaded on your local machine. They would minimize any sort of needs to reach out remotely. And that model is going to index, run inference on local repositories that you point it to. And it's going to give you a much better contextual response than something like a ChatGPT would, because it doesn't have the context. It hasn't indexed your code base or performed inference on your code base. ChatGPT has performed inference on a large body of code, but it hasn't done it on your code, right? So it's not going to understand your code style, your architectural choices, what version of some dependency you're using. If you're using a localized AI model, it will know those things. So one such product is Cody AI. It's created by a company called SourceGraph, which I believe is owned by Anthropic. But this is an example of Cody. I created a demo code base for a different talk. It was on Vue 3 and Pina and implementing TensorFlow.js features in that little demo code base. So I indexed it with Cody. and then asked it a question, like, I'm a new developer, tell me about this code base. What's it doing? Like, what technologies are at play here? And it got it right, and with pretty impressive detail. So based on the README, it's a Vue 3 app, demonstrates TensorFlow.js and machine learning, fetches posts from the Pexels API, correct, tracks users' facial expressions, correct, which is impressive because Face API does a number of different things, including like age, gender recognition, facial recognition, that sort of thing. But I only implemented one of them, and it was facial expression. And it figured that out. Image classification with Cocoa SSD. So all of these points that it derived were correct. So this is kind of the case in point where you're going to get a lot better results and a lot better code gen when it has indexed your code and performed inference on it. On the horizon, so Copilot X, I'm sure we're all using Copilot in here, right? They don't have a declared release date for this yet. But it's going to be what I've kind of been waiting for. It's going to be, Cody AI, which as you saw in that little thing there, it was like it's its own little desktop app window that you chat in. It's not like a super integrated experience into your IDE like you would probably want in the long run. And Copilot X is going to be that. So in addition to code completion, things that you're used to with Copilot, PR explanations and reviews, this is a huge one, right? So like, imagine when you were in college, boot camp, teaching yourself, junior dev, formative years, right? Imagine getting an explanation and an intelligent code review on every PR that you pushed. Like what's that going to do for our space in terms of newer devs entering our space, right? I think it's going to result in the long term of there being a lot more trained developers. Now, I don't think it's going to completely remove the need for senior dev mentorship and that kind of thing, but I think it is going to introduce some acceleration in how fast an individual can learn and getting that feedback loop. I apologize, I don't know why I keep cycling. No, it's a glitch with my USB hub, I guess. So anyway, voice to code, pretty cool, using AI to do inference on the voice and turn it into text. Chat with the code base, which is the core. It's like that Cody AI feature I was just showing you. That's really the core of what I'm looking for, like right in my IDE. Documentation answers, which is really cool. And then AI CLI assistance. And I do want to, on that point, take a moment and share my terminal setup in case you have not heard of Warp Terminal. It's what I've been using for a while. I really enjoy it. I'm going to show you real quick why I enjoy it. From an AI perspective, this is you may not be able to see it super well, but you can control space here, and it'll open up this side panel, and you can ask it a question. So an example for me is, for whatever reason, my dumb brain will not hold on to the correct syntax for search and replace on the command line. And I'll frequently run up as a backend developer against, like, I've got this SQL dump file and I want to replace some stuff in it, right? And so I'll go, oh gosh, just remind me of the syntax, like, like how do I perform a search and replace? And so like in my terminal, it's going to give me that a total walkthrough of, like a man page with examples, right? But even better than that, I'll zoom in here as much as I can on my terminal. I can put a pound symbol here and do the same thing. How to search and replace text, and it's going to come up with that, even with the interactive replace or whatever. And the really cool thing is it gives you this like tabbed kind of interface. So I can say, okay, this is the search term I'm looking to replace, and this thing is the replacement, and then this is like the target SQL dump file, like, right? And boom, done. So how is stuff like this going to revolutionize DevOps, or maybe some of us developers that don't get to do deployments and things that would involve more command line interactivity like this? It's going to allow us to kind of level up and operate more efficiently, do more in a shorter period of time. So anyway, Warp Terminal, I wanted to share that with you guys. Cool. So in terms of privacy, like, doesn't GitHub Copilot use OpenAI's ChatGPT or really Codex in the background? And from a privacy perspective, how does using Copilot differ from slapping some proprietary code in the web interface for ChatGPT? So data privacy, when you're using Copilot, according to their agreement and terms, like, they're not training on your code and they're not sending your code to remote services. Like we talked about before, contextual awareness, like, that's a big differentiator. ChatGPT has no contextual awareness of your code style, your dependencies, your architecture, your code base, right? So you're going to get a lot more relevant suggestions from something like a Copilot or a Cody AI. Thus, the code quality, of course, is going to be better. And then scope, focused on code completion, tightly integrated with Visual Studio Code and other IDEs. I am admittedly a dyed-in-the-wool JetBrains fan. I use PHP Storm most days, but obviously available for that as well. Landscape is growing rapidly. Some honorable mentions in this code completion space. Tab 9's been around for a while. I think it's been around even longer than Copilot has. It's a premium service. Codium, I've played with Tab 9 in my limited testing. Wasn't as good as Copilot in terms of experience. Codium, never tried it, but free AI-powered code completion tool directly competes as well. Replit Ghostwriter, little bit different approach. It's a cloud-based IDE, but attempts to perform similar tasks to what we've been talking about here. And of course, Amazon Code Whisperer, its big differentiating factor is that it is trying to give you recommendations on security. So it's taking into consideration like top 10 OWASP security vulnerabilities and whatnot. It's important to note that Code Whisperer is still in development. It's not ready for prime time yet, but based on my research, I don't know exactly when they intend for it to be prime time, but you can subscribe to it. You can use it today. So I think today we can probably all agree OpenAI is leading the space, but as part of this talk, I wanted to, in case it wasn't on your radar, kind of talk about what the big tech giant layout looks like and who's doing what and who's kind of leading this space. And this is specifically centered around Copilot, Cody AI, some of the other ones I'm going to show you here, this code completion, code gen, chat about my code kind of space, right? And Microsoft is leading it. They've got $13 billion invested in OpenAI. It's important to note that they do not own OpenAI, but I think they are their heaviest investors. There are other companies that are fairly heavily invested in OpenAI. I know Elon Musk was involved in their earlier days and had a few billion invested there. It's an interesting trend that's developing where the tech giants are, in addition to being heavily invested in these startups, are also in tandem building their own competing products. And I don't have a view behind the curtain to really understand why they're doing that, or if they're drawing from the experience of some of these startups like OpenAI and Anthropic. But Microsoft is developing a AI-powered coding tool called IntelliCode. Based on my research, it's targeting just things that are in the Microsoft ecosystem. So things like C#, Visual Basic, Visual Studio Code, etc. Similarly, Amazon, $4 billion into Anthropic. And Anthropic is behind Claude and Claude 2, and that's a direct competitor to ChatGPT. They're also behind SourceGraph and Cody AI that I showed you earlier. And so doing the same thing that Microsoft is doing. So in addition to being heavily invested in Anthropic, they are also in tandem developing Code Whisperer. So it's going to be interesting to see why they're doing this and what they do with these tools in the future. And then finally, Google is kind of a lagging player in this specific space within the greater AI space. They have a lot of AI-centric tools. But in terms of coding tools, they do have something that's in active development, but details are kind of fuzzy and it's still early stage. So moving on, Frontier Model Forum is a thing you should know about. It's very recently formed. Microsoft, Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI were founding members. Amazon is also a member. It is an organization, in my head, I'm thinking like the World Wide Web Consortium, like making standards, around how browsers interpret code and things, right? Like this is kind of similar on the scale of like, hey, let's make sure that somebody's not creating eagle eye, right? And that we're using AI technology for, healthy things for the betterment of society and our fellow man. So not really sure exactly what part they're going to play, but a thing you should know about. So AI and historical context. I'm sure for any of us that have played around with ChatGPT for any period of time, we've run up against this thing where we're like, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to do this thing for me. And it's like, hey, my memory only goes to January of 2022 or whatever. And if you want something more recent than that, sorry about your luck, right? And so it's important to note that for paying members of OpenAI's service, they did just introduce a browse with Bing that's supposed to be performing GPT-4 inference on Bing search results. My results were mixed with that one. The results were not as good as some of the other tools that I'd been using. Similarly, we got plugin support a few months ago, I want to say, and there are a few plugins that also try to do the same thing, where pull in like current search results and then perform inference on it, but also was not able to get nearly as good a result set as I was with the other tools I'm about to show you. So Perplexity AI is a tool that has pretty much largely replaced my web browsing. I don't really go to Google a ton anymore. Perplexity indexes and returns results from all of the major search engines, a bunch of informational sites. It also offers file upload for context from a number of different file types, media file types, text-based file types. And so this is a great all-purpose search tool that will very quickly narrow down to the result set that's appropriate and give you a nice contextual summarization. It can even do like some code gen examples and that sort of thing. I found that playing a close second, there is another tool that I use for a very specific purpose, and that's Phind.com, Phind.com. And it competes directly with Perplexity. It doesn't do as good of a job, in my opinion, or my experience, with generalized searching. Doesn't offer file upload support. But what it does do really, really well is documentation. Like, if your documentation is available online, Phind does an exceptionally good job of finding the exact page in the documentation that's relevant to your prompt, giving you the references to those pages and a very intelligent response on whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, including code examples if you ask for them. So Phind.com has been a very useful tool for me. This segment is more of an on my radar segment. These are tools that I don't have a lot of experience with yet, but these are things that I'm interested in, on my radar, things that I intend to evaluate in the very, very near future. Cursor is the first and probably one of the most important. Several of my colleagues at work are already using this. One of them demoed this to me, and it really is Copilot X, like in the demo. It's that GPT-4 intelligent chat about my code base. Like, you had done the whole Cody AI thing, you've indexed my code base, performed inference on it, and right in my IDE, I can have a chat conversation with you. It will gen code for me that I can then read through and use if I see fit, et cetera, et cetera. They have a free tier. It's probably not the best idea because you have to hook up your OpenAI key to it, and based on our test results, it could cost upwards of maybe $100 a month if you had no regard for API calls that were being made. They do have paid tiers, and the $20 paid tier will limit those API calls and is more than enough to get our everyday tasks done. So it's going to be about $20 a month, but my colleague Logan was like, listen, I've been using this thing for 4 months now, and it's hands down the best $20 I've spent in a long, long time. So would definitely recommend checking out Cursor. So the next one that's on my radar, Builder.io. How many people are familiar with Builder.io and who's behind it and all that kind of thing? Okay, so Misko Hevery is the creator of Angular, AngularJS. He's the CTO at Builder.io. Their monetization product is a CMS that's targeted around e-commerce, but beyond. But they are also behind some open source projects like Quick and Quick City. And they just announced a few days ago a feature on Builder.io, Figma to Code. So according to their stated features, I have not tested this yet, but if this works the way that they say that it's going to work, you can basically feed it garbage Figma files with no responsive designs, no auto layout or anything, and it will generate for you any framework that you want, any CSS preprocessor or framework that you want, responsively styled. So imagine a world where design handoff to dev means running it through a pipeline that now has generated all the presentational part of your code base, period. And you never have to do any sort of markup or styling again. Like that's what they're talking about, or it's close to it, right? So, excuse me, this is definitely something that is on my radar of interest, and I think it's probably worth us all, especially since we're all front-end developers, checking out, right? This is the last one that's on my radar, Rewind AI. I have a colleague that's using this as well. It was impressive to me. So it's basically like a graph database on your local machine, and the software is keeping a memory of everything that's happened on your machine. You can kind of like play it back as though it were a video, and it is generating text files from everything that was spoken. And so it's great for like, hey, it's 6 in the afternoon or 7 o'clock in the evening and finishing up work, and oh my gosh, at 1 p.m. I know I had that meeting where they gave me the context for that one feature I got to get out, but I can't remember what they said, and nobody took notes on it, and that kind of thing. Like, Rewind is going to be transformative for that kind of memory need, I think. It has some other use cases, but for those of us that are frequently involved in client meetings or stakeholder meetings, or we're responsible as leaders for like keeping track of a lot of this stuff, I think Rewind could be an amazing tool for us. So generative AI, we've been talking a lot about NLP and LLMs and things, but I wanted to include a little bit of generative AI in here. The big players that I'm aware of currently, OpenAI has DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, and then of course there's Midjourney. I personally have the most experience playing around with Midjourney. I'm a full stack developer, and I specialize more in architecture. I'm writing a lot of business logic. I don't do a whole lot of visual, like, I code front end. I of course write markup and styling and things like that, but it's only a part of what I do, right? And so I don't get in Figma. I don't generate designs. I don't go out and shop for images or take images or that kind of thing. But nonetheless, I think generative AI is very cool, and I thought it would be worthwhile for me to at least play around with one of them. And so I've had some experience playing around with Midjourney, and I just wanted to share like my process, what I've learned, and do kind of a little primer. I thought that might be fun. And so my process is that I will find some reference images online. Let's go to Google Images or wherever you may go to find images about a thing. Obviously, you're going to have to put your creativity to work and imagine an image that you want to create with generative AI, right? And so then we'll use Midjourney's Describe feature to perform inference and describe the reference images that we've selected. We're going to use an LLM like ChatGPT to then take those descriptions, take our own prompt for what we're trying to accomplish, and use it as an assistive prompt engineer for Midjourney to kind of extrapolate and generate us a prompt or several prompts. We're then going to use Midjourney's Imagine feature to begin generating some images. And then the final process is an iterative refinement process that I call refeeding. So Midjourney, the process generally, for me at least, will involve, it'll get close. Like it'll get some things right, not everything's right? And so I will refeed in things that are the closest, while I'm updating parameters and prompts until I steer it in the direction to get the result that I'm after, right? So it's important to note that the interface for Midjourney is Discord. You will interact with the bot on Discord. And so for this demonstration, I work at Black Airplane, right? And so our logo is a Corsair, so I thought it might be fun, you know, like let's do a battle image of like a Corsair with some dramatic like lightning and clouds and stuff, right? And so I went out and found a few reference images. I kind of liked the artwork, the one on the left. Found one that was kind of distinct lightning, right? And then an image of a real Corsair in flight. So then step 2, ran those through the describe feature to figure out, okay, Midjourney, how do you see these images? How would you describe these images? Because I want to take that language, that key language that you're using, and I want to manipulate it to get the result I want out of you, right? And you'll start to see patterns emerge, and I think the 2 most prominent patterns that I've seen is in the style of and the word core. So as it's describing things, you'll see it do things like you're seeing here, gamer core, battle core, warplane core, like steampunk core. Like it'll come up with all these like cores, and it's nonsensical, right? But we're learning to speak its language and, you know, like learn how to drive it. And so I found that if I want a specific feature in an image to have more weight, coming up with my own like core, like lightning core, you know, like if I want lightning, right, is a thing. And then in the style of is another one. And then the third one is you'll see that it comes up with names. So it'll try to derive what the style of the artwork is or the style of the photography is that you fed it, and it'll start coming up with names like, oh, this is like a Todd McFarlane picture. I don't know who Todd McFarlane is, but I do know that if I really like the style of this image and I feed that name into the prompt, I'm going to get more of this kind of style. It's like going to add weight to getting more of this kind of style. So anyway, we do that with all 3 of our reference images, both planes and the lightning here. And then we're feeding it back into the LLM, right? So we're just writing my own prompt. Use your, like we've all interacted with ChatGPT here. It might take a little trial and error, you know, until you get what you like. But write your own prompt. Also feed in all the descriptive stuff that you got out of Midjourney, and then let's take it back into Midjourney. So the result is I asked it for 3 revisions of a prompt, and that's what I got. So take it back into Midjourney, and I'm like, hey, this is what I want. It did a pretty good job. You know, it's giving me Corsairs that are kind of dark with yellow accents. I'm like, okay, it's close. And they're in battle, you know. I'm running it on all 3 prompts, but I'm like, where's the lightning? You know, like, gosh. And so I will always run it on all 3, generally speaking, because sometimes you just hit pay dirt on one of them. For whatever reason, it just really likes ChatGPT's language, and you'll hit pay dirt, but I did not. So now we come to this refeeding and this iterative process and kind of fine-tuning what we're getting from the algorithm with its parameters. The ones that, there are more than this, these are the ones that I found to be most useful, they're the ones that I use the most. I will typically leave the version on 5.2 unless I find information that changing the version might, you know, in my specific current case, might help me, but generally stay on 5.2. S is stylize, so this is going to kind of adjust how much creative, like artistic freedom the algorithm gets to have on what it's generating. So as you get into larger numbers, you're going to see more elements in your generated image that are not present in the reference images that you're feeding it. It might add other things to it, like a graininess to it, or it might colorize the picture a little bit differently to play around with different styles. So you can kind of control, you know, how that's doing that. Aspect ratio, it's kind of self-explanatory there, but you obviously are probably going to want to be explicit on what kind of aspect ratio you want in the output. And then chaos. Chaos is a very interesting parameter. For images where you want the result to be kind of grounded in reality, like you want the physics of it to be fairly grounded in reality, I've found that values of like 20 to 40 for chaos are great. So as you get Closer to 100, you're going to get like paint splatters all over the place. You're going to get like planes flying underwater with whales, and just like it's just going to diverge from reality. So it's definitely it would be useful. Maybe you're writing like a fantasy novel or comic book or something, and you want things that are diverged from reality. It's useful for that kind of stuff, right? And then image weight is also incredibly useful in this process because you can lead your prompts to Midjourney with up to like 3 or 4 images. I usually keep it to 1 or 2 images. And then that image weight controls, how much similarity there is to those reference images in the resulting generations. So we introduced some flags and parameters, and we're getting closer. Darker fuselage, still got the yellow accents, brooding clouds. We're in flight now, fighting, that kind of thing. It's getting better. Then refeeding a Corsair that I like back in, kind of keeping that lightning because I'm still not getting the lightning yet. And to give it more emphasis on the lightning, I finally got a pretty cool result set that actually included some, albeit diverted from reality a bit, lightning behind my Corsair, right? So the tail structure isn't exactly correct for a Corsair. Depending on the requirements for whatever it is that you're trying to generate, I stopped here, but you could continue to refeed this and refine it until you got just the correct structure on the plane that you were looking for. But generated a few more. So the point is, once it has something to grab onto and you've gotten that style that you're looking for, it becomes a lot easier to kind of refeed those iterations, tell it what you're liking about images, and try to focus it in on the things that you want. So this was probably my favorite stylistically, even though it did not get the structure of the plane fully correct with that extra engine. But you can see, like, I did a few more generations, and it's gotten the idea now. So in general, you can, and I did this in 30 minutes, 20 or 30 minutes. So it's not insignificant in the amount of time that it takes to get it done. But for somebody like me, who's usually writing code and not usually having to worry about the photograph that's showing up on something I'm creating, I could still see a situation where maybe design is super busy, and maybe we really need that super impactful header, in the hero image. And, I could spend 20 minutes and come in clutch and generate some cool, like, Corsair with lightning. Yeah? So anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys. Lastly, once you get what you want, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I'm not as familiar as you are with this video output format. Is it just an image, or can you download like a layered document like Photoshop?
Yeah, in my experience, it's just generating PNGs, so it's just flattened raster graphics that it's generating. So you would need to take it into another tool that would vectorize it or something and there are AI tools out there that could take this result and vectorize it if you wanted to take it further. Yes?
Do you have to worry about copyright?
I do believe that the resulting images belong to you. So this is your image. Yes?
Well, I disagree. I think that's an open question. And if you prompted it to do it in the style of Todd McFarlane, could he come in and say you're stealing my artwork? And that's a whole big open issue.
Only if he's able to legally copyright a style of artwork. If you're ripping off and selling his creation, his artwork, yeah, absolutely. He could probably sue you over that. Go ahead. Yes, Martin.
Oh, I was just saying, I think it was like a month ago, the Trademark and Patent Office ruled that no AI work can be copyrighted.
Okay, so thank you, Martin. No AI work can be copyrighted. So I guess if you needed it to be copyrighted, maybe you don't use it. And I think perhaps that's not the end of where we land. I think maybe we'll still see an evolution of decision making around that topic occur, but because I see this as a useful technology for generating, like, this is unique. Nobody's ever made this picture that you're looking at before, right? So anyway, and that is what I've got for you guys for right now. These are the people I follow. I wanted to share these with you. I follow Fireship on YouTube for like up and coming things, if you've not heard of him. Mo Gadot is a cool voice that I like to listen to. He was the ex-chief business officer at Google X. He oversaw a lot of robotics and AI projects during his time there. He's written a book called Scary Smart, The Future of Artificial Intelligence and How You Can Save the World. Andrew Rustelka is more of like a guilty pleasure, I guess I should say. He posts a lot of cool stuff on LinkedIn, just like AI gadgets and things like that. So my name is Will Marple. Again, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. So feel free to connect with me, and I'd love to collaborate with you guys. I think we still have a few minutes left. So there is one other thing that I was intending to do, but in my practice didn't have enough time. I've got a code base that code base I was telling you about earlier that uses TensorFlow.js and Vue3 and that kind of thing. So is anybody interested in seeing Vue3 and TensorFlow.js and whatnot? Oh, Blake's interested. All right, so let's. No. I'm gonna I'm gonna show the code base. I'm gonna show what it does, and then I'm gonna show you how I implemented it in the code base. So this is more the point of this is, in addition to using AI tools to actually create code or reason about code, I think another thing that should be on our radar, a thing that we should be considering is we don't need to be data scientists or have a background in ML to put AI capabilities into our applications anymore. Like TensorFlow.js is a really cool technology because it loads a model like right on the client, can perform inference on your client machine, and can do all kinds of cool stuff. So let's go ahead and boot it up since we've got time. All right, let's go to here, TensorFlow.js. This code base is written in Vue3, Pina, TensorFlow.js, of course, and it's using Vite for the build chain. Okay. All right, so let's close out all this stuff. We're gonna go ahead and allow the camera. All right, everybody see it okay? Yeah, cool. All right, waiting for the camera feed to come online here. Oh, does this every time. Ventura, thank you so much for connecting to my phone. I always have to disconnect it from my phone and make it use my webcam. Okay, cool. All right, so the idea of this application is it's just a proof of concept. Has privacy concerns, obviously, but this is like, imagine a social media app, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, right, where you're scrolling through a social feed, and the idea is an algorithm that is going to figure out how long that you have dwelled on a particular image, what objects, so using AI to classify like what objects are in that image, and then using AI to recognize where your face is and how you felt about looking at that image. So there are ways that you could expound upon this, of course, but I've got a little overlay here on every image, and it thinks I'm very sad right now because of my beard, but but if I get happy, I can go 99% happy, right, or surprised. So it's figuring out like what facial expression I have, right? And then I didn't do a real-time dwell. I figured like if I was actually building this, I don't have like a timer running or something. I'm just like, I'm using an intersection observer in JavaScript to figure out like when that image has entered the page and when it leaves. So I'll timestamp it when it comes in, I'll timestamp it when it comes out, and I'll diff it and say you looked at it this long, right? So this is the basic concept of the app. So let's go ahead and move over into the code base. And And I'll give you guys a link to this. It's a public repo. My intention is for folks to be able to pull this down and use it as an example. Excuse me here. All right, we're going to go into components, going to go into feed. So this feed.view file is where we're going to want to start out. Another purpose for this code base is to kind of teach people how to use Vue 3. And so there's some low-hanging fruit, refactoring that can be done in here as well. Obviously, you wouldn't typically write an application like this all in one component. Some low-hanging fruit might be to create a post component and do a v4 and generate a post for every post in the post array, right? But since this is an AI talk, let's talk about the AI features of what's going on in here. So the intersection observer is the first piece. That's how dwell time is being figured out. And I will zoom in a little bit here. So we've got an event handler that handles the intersection event, figures out if we're entering or leaving, and then it's using the Pina global state as its state store to kind of store, like, what are we currently looking at? What have we removed? How long has it been dwelled upon? That sort of thing. Let me close this down. It might be a little easier. Let's go into view here. Let's close that out. If we go into emotions, so you can see this is the Pina, or sorry, the dev tools didn't load my Pina dev tools this time. Come on, Pina, there you are. Okay, cool. Visible post. Now we need it to generate some images or some inferences on emotions. Okay, cool. So now I want this back. So on our posts, you'll notice here we've got predictions and emotions, right, in our global state. This B box is like what the facial recognition is doing to figure out, like, hey, where is the face in this picture or in this video feed? Emotions, like, it's always going to give you all the emotions every time, which I'll show here in just a second. And then it gives a confidence level represented as a float value for every single one of them. But anyway, this is intersection observer. Let's go look at something a little more interesting, which would be the image classification with Cocoa SSD. And this is really the main point one of the main points that I wanted to get at with this. Like, I sat down and wrote this in like an hour, and reflecting on the fact that, like, I can write a little demo social media app that does something like this and recognizes stuff in images and facial expressions and whatnot in an hour. Like, that's pretty cool. And it's not impressive because I'm impressive. It's cool because these technologies are impressive, right? Like, all you have to do is install it like you would install any other dependency, right? And you load the model here on line 9. We're loading Cocoa SSD. Returns a promise. When it's ready, it will return that model that's ready to perform inference. Then we call the function that's going to actually feed it the input that it needs to perform inference on, right? And that's line 26 here, model detect. And so we're feeding it that featured image that you're seeing in the post feed there. And then you can see down here in the post store, in my Pina store, that's where we're actually adding it onto that predictions property I was showing you before. So that is image classification, and that's how this piece is working, where it's 99% sure that it found a cat, found a kite, thinks it found an airplane. It's not perfect. And that's another interesting thing about TensorFlow, is that you can take these pre-trained models, and there's a thing called transfer learning. So you can actually train these models on more specific, like, additional data sets and refine the capabilities of the model. So if you had a production use case for this, you could actually put the time in with transfer learning to get it to recognize exactly what you were after, right? And see, sure, it found an umbrella. So that's image classification. The last one is the facial expression, which I think is probably arguably the coolest thing. And this is actually a package. This is not the previous classification example was an example of loading an actual TensorFlow JS model. This one is using TensorFlow JS core under the hood in the context or within a package called faceapi.js. And that Face API package has the ability to do detection of where a single or multiple faces are. You can figure out if it's the same face or not across multiple images, and in this case, the expression. But low-hanging fruit, you could also add in gender and age recognition to this as well from this package. So pretty interesting package, but again, flow is very similar. You're just installing the package. You have a little bit different syntax here to load the models. In this case, in this models directory on the left, these are the binaries that actually are required to perform inference on the input, right? But pretty basic. This is the code here that is needed to actually grab the video feed from the webcam. And then we are starting the emotion tracking. We will feed that video feed as input into our loaded model. And then we will get detections as a result. And again, we will get all emotions all the time with a confidence level as a float value assigned to every emotion that it's able to recognize. And so in this case, I'm just taking the highest confidence level and returning it, but you could do a number of different things with that. So it's 2:22. I think we got 8 minutes left, and let's see. Let me disconnect here, and I'm going to see if I've got any takers in the database that want a copy of the TensorFlow JS book. All right, entries. Oh, we got 19 entries. All right, cool. Let me just... There we go, that's what I want. There we go. All right, the first one is Blake Neese. Imagine that. Come on. All right, let's do another one. Elizabeth Dodd. Do we have an Elizabeth Dodd? Yes, we do. I promise I dumped the tables before this talk. Congrats. All right, that's what I got for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the talk. Thank you.